My husband was barely cold in the ground when his mother marched into my kitchen in a blazer. Her son, trailing behind her with a tape measure, told me she was taking the house, the firm, every dollar Ryan ever built, and that she didn't want our daughter because she never signed up for someone else's child. She didn't knock. Diane never knocked. The back door swung open at 9:14 on a Tuesday morning, 11 days after I buried my husband. I know the exact time because I'd been staring at the kitchen clock for 20 minutes, trying to remember whether Lily had eaten breakfast. My daughter was 6 years old and had spent the past week asking me what heaven smelled like. I hadn't answered. I still hadn't figured out what to say. The door opened, and Diane walked in like the deed was already in her name. She was dressed for court. A charcoal blazer with structured shoulders, pearl buttons, pressed slacks, gold drop earrings she'd worn to every Christmas dinner I could remember. Her hair was set. Her lipstick was fresh. She looked like a woman arriving to accept an inheritance, not visit a grieving daughter-in-law. Her son Marcus followed her in. He was 29, wearing a navy sport coat and carrying an actual tape measure, a professional contractor's reel, bright yellow, still in the packaging. He went straight past me without eye contact and disappeared into the guest bedroom. I heard the plastic crack as he broke it open. I heard the metallic snick as he pulled the tape across my wall. Diane settled at my kitchen island. She placed her handbag on the counter with the deliberate care of someone claiming a surface. She looked around the kitchen, my kitchen, the one Ryan and I had spent 3 weekends tiling the backsplash on, the one where Lily had learned to walk by gripping the cabinet pulls. And she looked at it the way a person looks at a property they are already mentally redecorating. Nina, she said. Not a question, not a greeting. Just my name, used like punctuation. She laid out her terms. Ryan had borrowed $185,000 from her, she said. No contract between them, no equity agreement. Just a number she'd been turning over in her hands for 5 years, waiting for the right moment to spend it. She wanted the house. She wanted the firm. She wanted every account Ryan had ever built, every billing relationship, every asset with his name attached. The life insurance, the retirement accounts, the business, all of it. And Lily? She paused. Something moved across her face. Not regret, not warmth, calculation. I never signed up for someone else's child, she said. My daughter was 6 years old in the next room, watching cartoons in the clothes she'd slept in because I hadn't managed to get her dressed yet. And her grandmother, the only grandmother she'd ever known, declined her like a side dish. No thank you. Not the child, just the assets. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I set my coffee mug down on the counter very carefully, and I said I would need a few days to think. Diane told me she didn't think that was necessary. I told her I'd be in touch. She picked up her handbag and walked back out the same door she'd come in through. Marcus folded his tape measure and followed her without looking at me. They were in my home for 14 minutes. I need to back up, because Diane didn't become this person the day Ryan died. She arrived at our marriage fully formed. I met Ryan Calloway in the fall of 2014. I was 27. He was 31. We were introduced by a mutual friend at a fundraiser for a children's legal aid clinic, which should have told me something about the kind of man he was. He spent 2 hours talking to me about a case he was working pro bono for a family that had been displaced by a predatory landlord. He wasn't performing. He was genuinely angry on their behalf. I was done for. We dated for a year and a half before he proposed. I had a daughter already. Lily's biological father had left when she was 4 months old, a man who'd made that decision with the calm efficiency of someone canceling a subscription he'd never really wanted. Ryan didn't flinch. On our 4th date, he asked what Lily's favorite color was because he wanted to bring her something. It was purple. He showed up with a purple stuffed elephant the size of a golden retriever. Lily named it Captain Stomps. She still has it. We married in October 2016. Lily was 2. Ryan adopted her the following spring. Diane attended the adoption hearing. She sat in the second row and smiled for the photographs. I have one of those photographs framed on my hallway wall. In it, Diane is smiling. Ryan is laughing. Lily is making her serious face, the one she made when she was concentrating very hard on being important. I used to think that photograph was a document of happiness. I understand now that Diane's smile was the smile of someone watching a transaction, not a family being made. She wasn't cruel to Lily. I want to be accurate about that. She wasn't warm either. She remembered Lily's birthday with a card and a check and forgot everything else. Her grade level, her teacher's name, whether she liked strawberries or hated them. Lily called her Grandma D the way a child says the name of a distant relative they've been instructed to be polite to. They weren't close. Diane hadn't made space for that. What Diane was, consistently, reliably, year after year, was a woman who believed that the $185,000 she'd loaned Ryan bought her a seat at every table. Ryan started his firm in 2017, personal injury litigation. He'd worked at a mid-size practice for 6 years, built a reputation, had clients who followed him out the door when he left. His mother had capital sitting in a savings account earning nothing, and when he asked, she said yes. No paperwork, no terms, just a transfer and a handshake, and the unspoken agreement that Diane would never, ever let him forget it. She didn't. My investment, she called the firm at family dinners. Not Ryan's firm, my investment. She came to the office holiday party in December 2018 and introduced herself to Ryan's paralegal as one of the senior stakeholders. She called Ryan on a Saturday morning in March 2019 to tell him she'd read online that a personal injury verdict in a similar case had returned $3.2 million and wanted to know why his verdicts weren't that large. She had no law degree. She had no understanding of how litigation worked. She had $185,000 and a receipt she kept in her memory and took out whenever she needed leverage. The worst incident I ever saw happened at Thanksgiving 2020. Ryan had just lost a case, a hard one, a client he'd believed in, a verdict that had gone wrong at the last moment for reasons that weren't his fault and weren't fair. He was devastated the way only someone who genuinely cares about the outcome can be devastated. He came to dinner quiet and worn thin. Diane brought it up over dessert. "I saw your case settled," she said, in the tone of someone discussing a minor inconvenience. "I looked at the verdict. That's a significant loss for the firm." Ryan said yes. He said it had been a hard week. "I hope this isn't a pattern," Diane said. "A lot of people trusted you with a lot of money." She meant herself. Everyone at that table knew she meant herself. Ryan set his fork down very gently on the edge of his plate. I watched his hand do it, watched him make the decision not to respond. And he said, "Mom, not tonight." She pivoted immediately to the sweet potato dish. That moment, that pivot, that precise move of detonating something and then acting as if the smoke was other people's problem. I filed that away without knowing why. I would understand it completely later. Ryan died on March 7th of this year. He was 41 years old, heart condition, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a thickening of the heart wall that had been there his whole life without announcing itself. He was diagnosed in July of last year, 8 months before he died. The cardiologist was cautious but not panicked. Ryan was told to manage stress, to adjust his workload, to follow up in 6 months. He never told his mother. He told me that same night, sitting in our car in the hospital parking garage because neither of us had wanted to go back inside the house yet and make it real. He was calm. Ryan was always calm in the way that very frightened people teach themselves to be. He held my hand. He said he wasn't going to spend whatever time he had worrying, but that he was going to spend it planning. Ryan was a personal injury attorney. He had watched for his entire career what happened to families who didn't plan. He had seen it in depositions and courtrooms and settlement conferences. He had seen grieving people blindsided by paperwork they didn't know existed. He was not going to let that happen to us. He went to work. He didn't tell me everything he was doing. I knew he was meeting with estate attorneys. I knew he was updating documents. I knew he was moving carefully and deliberately through some kind of architecture he was building around us. He didn't explain all of it because he didn't want to frighten Lily, and he didn't want me living in a countdown. He just quietly built the structure and left it for me to find. He died on a Tuesday, sudden cardiac event. He was at his desk. His assistant found him. The paramedics were there in 6 minutes, which wasn't fast enough. I got the call at 2:47 in the afternoon. Lily was at school. I sat on the bottom stair in our front hallway for 40 minutes before I was able to stand up and call someone. The flowers on his grave were still fresh when Diane walked into my kitchen. 48 hours after Diane's visit, a certified letter arrived. Her attorney had filed a will contest and a creditor's claim against Ryan's estate, 2 separate legal actions. The will contest claimed Ryan had been unduly influenced in its drafting. By whom, it didn't say. The creditor's claim was the $185,000 with interest, totaling $211,000 by Diane's accounting. She filed those papers while I was still calling funeral homes to ask about monument options. My attorney's name is Claire Hendricks. She's been practicing estate and family law in this city for 22 years. I'd met her once before, briefly, at a bar association event Ryan had dragged me to. I called her the morning after the certified letter arrived because I couldn't think of who else to call. I sat in her office with my coat still on, and I walked her through everything. Diane's visit, the tape measure, the disclaimer about Lily, the legal filings. Claire listened without interrupting. She has the focused stillness of someone who has heard every version of every bad family story and does not need you to perform your grief for her to take it seriously. When I finished, she told me we could win. Nothing in writing gave Diane any equity. Ryan's will was clean, properly witnessed, notarized, filed correctly. The undue influence claim had no factual basis and would be expensive for Diane to pursue and expensive for us to defend, but it was unlikely to succeed. The creditor's claim was legitimate in that the money had changed hands, but an unsecured loan between family members with no contract and no established repayment terms placed Diane at the very bottom of the creditor priority list, behind the IRS, behind vendors with signed contracts, behind anyone with a piece of paper. Claire said, "We fight, we win, she goes home with nothing." I told Claire I needed a few days. She looked at me for a moment, not unkindly, and said she'd hold the file. I drove home through streets that felt like they belonged to a different version of my life. That night, I got Lily settled, turned off the lights in her room, stood in the hallway for a while, listening to her breathe. Then I drove to Ryan's office. I'd had the key in my bag for 2 weeks. I hadn't been able to go. The building was dark and quiet, the lobby lit only by the green glow of the exit signs, the kind of dim institutional light that makes everywhere feel slightly underwater. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. His assistant's desk was cleared but not emptied. The conference room door was ajar. His office was exactly as he'd left it. His desk smelled like coffee and sandalwood. I sat in his chair and I didn't turn on the overhead light. I just sat in the dark with the streetlight coming in through the blinds, making parallel lines across the carpet. I knew there was something to find because Ryan had told me in the last real conversation we'd had before things deteriorated quickly at the end. He'd been home for a late dinner, Lily already asleep, and he'd said very plainly that if anything happened, I should go to his desk and look in the bottom drawer. He said I would know what to do with what I found. I believed him. I'd had no reason not to. But I'd also hoped in the a particular irrational way that people hope that I would never need to look. I opened the bottom drawer. There was a sealed manila envelope, my name on the front, just Nina, in his handwriting with a small heart drawn next to it. His handwriting was terrible. I'd teased him about it for 9 years. The heart looked like a slightly lopsided geometric experiment. It was perfect. I opened the envelope and I read what was inside, and I sat there for nearly an hour without moving. For the first time since Ryan died, my mind went completely quiet. The envelope held 3 things: a letter, handwritten, 4 pages, beneficiary confirmation documents printed and organized with paper clips. Ryan had always been meticulous with paper clips. And a financial summary of the firm, 6 pages, prepared by an outside accountant Ryan had apparently hired for precisely this purpose, dated 4 months before he died. I read the letter first. He addressed it to me and Lily both, though he wrote it to me. He explained what he'd done and why. He explained the diagnosis more fully than he'd been able to say out loud. He told me he loved us in the direct, non-performative way that he had always been able to do in writing better than in speech. He told me to read the documents carefully. He said he was sorry for the parts of this that were going to be hard. He said he trusted me. I read it twice, then I set it aside and picked up the beneficiary confirmations. Ryan had updated his life insurance 8 months before he died, 1 month after his diagnosis. The policy was with Mutual of Omaha, face value $875,000. Named beneficiary, Nina Calloway, sole. No contingent beneficiaries. His 401k through Fidelity. Balance at the time of his death, $163,000. Named beneficiary, Nina Calloway, sole. A Roth IRA he'd opened in 2019 and never mentioned to me, apparently because he was the kind of person who funded a retirement account without making an announcement about it. Balance, $47,000. Named beneficiary, Nina Calloway, sole. Named beneficiaries on retirement and insurance accounts receive funds directly, outside of probate. They don't flow through the estate. They don't become part of the pile that creditors can pick through. They land in my account with a death certificate and a claim form, and no court order, no will contest, no attorney's letter can redirect them. Diane could not touch a single dollar of it, combined. Won the $85,000. Then I opened the firm's financial summary. Ryan had built something real with his mother's $185,000. That was true. He had built a proper office, 4 employees, $600,000 a year in billings, his name on a frosted glass door. That was also true. What Diane had never asked about, what she'd never shown any interest in understanding, because understanding required curiosity rather than possession, was the picture underneath the billings. $115,000 in outstanding vendor debts, software licenses, court reporting services, a data vendor who provided case research, a printing company with a long-standing contract, all of it with signed agreements, all of it senior to any unsecured family loan, a malpractice settlement that Ryan had agreed to before he died, $180,000, structured, signed. The plaintiff's attorney had already been in contact with the estate, $47,000 in unpaid payroll taxes. This one was a personal liability, not just a corporate debt. It would follow the owner. 34 months remaining on the office lease at $4,200 per month, $142,800 in committed future rent, requiring a personal guarantee to assume, a $220,000 home equity line Ryan had drawn to manage the firm's cash flow during a slow stretch in 2021 and 2022. The house carried a $160,000 primary mortgage, with both and the current market. After realtor fees and closing costs, the house netted almost nothing. The equity was gone. The $185,000 loan from Diane, unsecured, undocumented. No contract, no terms, no signed promissory note. The very informality that Diane had always treated as proof of the closeness between them was the informality that placed her loan dead, last behind the IRS, behind the malpractice plaintiff, behind every vendor with a signed agreement. It was not a matter of ethics. It was a matter of creditor priority law. She had been last in line since the day Ryan signed his first vendor contract. She just didn't know it yet. I sat with those numbers for a long time. I did the math once, then twice, then once more to be certain. Diane's total, approximately negative $520,000. My total, $585,000. Clean. Outside probate, already mine. I called Claire the next morning. Claire, I said, I've changed my mind. I don't want to fight. I want to give Diane everything. 10 seconds of silence from a woman who bills by the hour. I explained the documents. Claire pulled up Ryan's estate accounts on her screen while I talked. She asked me to wait while she worked through the firm financials. I could hear her clicking through spreadsheets. I heard the moment she understood, a very slight sound, almost involuntary, that might have been a laugh or might have been a breath. We laid it out carefully. The offer would look on paper like complete capitulation. Nina Calloway surrenders all claims and interest in Ryan's estate, the family home, the law firm, all associated business accounts, all equipment, the client list, the lease, the liabilities. In exchange, Diane drops the will contest and the creditor's claim. All estate matters resolved. Diane gets the empire. I keep my daughter. Sole legal and physical custody of Lily Calloway. No visitation rights for Diane Calloway. Claire read the offer back to me twice. Then she said, Ryan was brilliant. Then she picked up her pen. Diane's attorney received the offer on a Friday. He was experienced enough to ask for 2 weeks to audit the firm before anyone signed. That was the right call. That was the professional call. Diane said no. She had watched me for 7 years. Quiet Nina. Never arguing Nina. Never raised her voice Nina. No matter how many times Diane had referred to me as Ryan's first wife while I was standing right beside him. No matter how many times she'd looked through me in a room full of people. In Diane's mind, I was doing what I had always done. I was folding. She told her attorney, "Get me those papers before she changes her mind." The signing was a Tuesday, 23 days after Ryan was buried. Diane arrived in a cream silk blouse and her good gold earrings, full makeup. She walked into Claire's conference room the way she walked into every room, like she was expected to be the most important person in it. Marcus was beside her in his navy blazer. I noticed the small white tag still folded inside the collar. A price tag, not yet removed, on the blazer he'd worn to sign papers claiming a $500,000 estate. I wasn't going to be the one to tell him. I was already seated when they arrived. I had my coat on the back of the chair and a coffee cup in front of me, and I was watching the door. Claire sat beside me, her expression the controlled blank that she reserves for proceedings where she knows the outcome. Diane sat across from me. She arranged her bag on the table. She looked at the documents. She looked at me. "I hope this isn't going to take long," she said. "It won't," I said. It took 8 minutes. Her initials on 6 pages, her signature on the final 2, the estate transferred, the will contest withdrawn, the custody arrangement signed, Lily, fully and legally mine, with no visitation rights granted to Diane Calloway. As I stood to leave, Diane looked at me across the table. Her expression had warmed slightly in the way that a person's expression warms when they believe they've won something. "I hope," she said, "that you'll finally learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I picked up my bag. I looked at her for one moment, not in anger, not in triumph, just to remember the moment clearly. "Take care, Diane," I said, and I walked out. 3 weeks later, Diane walked into Ryan's firm as its legal and rightful owner. Day 1, a registered letter was waiting on the front desk. The IRS, $47,000 in unpaid payroll taxes, penalties now accruing monthly. The letter explained that as the new owner, liability transferred with the business. It included a contact number and a payment schedule. Diane called Marcus. Marcus called an accountant he knew. The accountant asked to see the books. Day 3, the malpractice plaintiff's attorney called. The $180,000 settlement was overdue. The plaintiff had waited through the estate transition as a courtesy. That courtesy had ended. The attorney was very firm and very polite and very clear about what would happen if payment was not received within 30 days. Diane called her own attorney. He said this was exactly what he had tried to warn her about. Day 5, the building landlord arrived in person. The lease on the 3rd floor office required a personal guarantee from the new owner. Without it, the landlord would begin eviction proceedings in 60 days. The monthly rate was $4,200. Diane did the math in her head. $600,000 a year in billings, $50,000 a month, $4,200 felt like rounding error, and she signed the personal guarantee without asking to see the full lease terms. She had just committed herself to $140,800 in rent obligations. She signed it smiling. Day 8, the temp accountant Diane had hired to get a picture of the firm's finances spent 4 hours in the books, 4 hours of going quiet, 4 hours of page turning and note-taking and the particular focused silence of someone doing arithmetic they do not want to be doing. Then she turned to Diane and she said, in the voice of someone who had just opened a closet and found a staircase going straight down, "Ma'am, are you aware there are over $115,000 in outstanding vendor invoices? Several with default clauses that have already triggered." Diane was not aware. She called her attorney that night. He read her the advisory letter, his advisory letter, the one he'd sent her 3 weeks earlier recommending the 2-week audit, back to her, word for word. He did not say, "I told you so," because he was a professional, but he read every sentence. Then he told her what her options were. They were limited. The IRS liability was not negotiable. The malpractice settlement was contracted and overdue. The vendor debts had default clauses that were already triggering late fees. The personal guarantee on the lease was signed and binding. Diane's $185,000 loan to the firm, the one she'd been polishing for 5 years, the one she'd filed a creditor's claim over, was last in priority behind every other debt. She would never see a dollar of it. The firm that had been worth $600,000 in annual billings was worth, net of its obligations, approximately negative $520,000. And then Diane called me. I was in the kitchen when my phone lit up. Lily was at the table doing her homework. The counter between us was covered in 3rd-grade math worksheets and the remains of a snack I'd been too preoccupied to clear away. It was a regular evening, a quiet one, the kind of evening I had been slowly, carefully learning to have again. I watched Diane's name glow on my screen. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, 4. I watched Lily bend over her worksheet, pressing down hard with her pencil the way she does when she's working through something that requires concentration. She looked exactly like Ryan when she concentrated, the same line between the brows, the same very slight tilt of the head. I let it go to voicemail. She did not leave one. The weeks after that were not simple. I want to be honest about that. A collapsed estate doesn't settle quietly. Marcus called once from a number I didn't recognize and tried to suggest that I had somehow misled Diane, that I must have known the firm's financials when I made the offer and had maneuvered her into signing. I said that every number was available in the firm's accounts, which her attorney had requested access to audit and which Diane herself had declined. Marcus said said that wasn't the point. I said I didn't know what point he meant. He hung up. Ryan's employees reached out. 4 of them, 2 paralegals, an associate, and his longtime assistant, Sandra, who had been with him since the firm's 2nd year. They wanted to know what was happening. I couldn't tell them much. The estate was no longer mine. But I passed along Claire's number and quietly helped Sandra connect with a colleague of Ryan's at another firm who had been asking about her. All 4 of them found new positions within 6 weeks. The firm folded in under 3 months. Diane hired an attorney to explore whether she had any recourse against me. The attorney apparently told her that I had made a legal offer. She had declined due diligence, and the financial disclosures were available in the firm's existing records. There was no fraud. There was no concealment. There was only a woman who had underestimated the thing she'd spent 5 years trying to take. Claire told me this secondhand, with the same controlled expression she uses in proceedings where she knows the outcome. There is a version of all of this that I've turned over in my mind in the month since. A version where I feel like I should feel triumphant. I don't exactly. Something was lost in the years before Ryan died. The possibility that his mother could have been something other than what she was. That the family I married into could have been the family I'd needed it to be. That's the version of this story that doesn't have a satisfying ending. A woman spent 7 years treating me like furniture, declined my daughter at the worst possible moment, and turned out to have been wrong about every calculation she'd ever made. I don't feel good about that. I feel sad in the particular way you feel sad when someone proves, definitively, that they were never capable of being better. Lily asked me once, a few months later, if Grandma Dee was going to come for Christmas. I told her no. She thought about this for a moment. That's okay, she said, and went back to what she was doing. Children know things before they can name them. She had always known, I think, that she was being tolerated rather than loved. 6 years old, and she absorbed the news of her grandmother's permanent absence with more equanimity than I had managed to bring to anything in the preceding year. It's been 14 months now. Lily is in 2nd grade. She is fierce and funny, and does this thing where she narrates her own activities in the 3rd person when she's playing alone. Lily picks up the elephant. Lily decides to go on an adventure, and I could listen to it for hours. Captain Stomps lives on the bed. The purple elephant Ryan brought on our 4th date, the one that sealed the whole deal for both of us, still has the same slightly smashed ear from being slept on for 5 years. I kept the house. I paid off the home equity line in full and refinanced the primary mortgage at a rate I could manage. Ryan's life insurance and retirement accounts gave me time. The thing grief costs most, time, and I used it carefully. I went back to work part-time in the spring, full-time in the fall. I'm good at what I do. I'd forgotten that. Claire's firm sent me a bottle of wine at the holidays with a card that said, in her handwriting, Ryan would be pleased. I put the card in the drawer with his letter. I open the drawer sometimes, not often, just when I need to remember that there is still a version of this world in which people build things that last. Diane's name comes up occasionally, through mutual acquaintances, through paperwork that still occasionally roots through old channels. She sold her house in March. I don't know where she went. I find, genuinely, that I don't spend much time thinking about her. What I think about is the moment in that office, sitting in Ryan's chair in the dark, with the exit signs glowing green in the hallway, and his letter in my hands and his handwriting, that terrible, beloved handwriting, making the case for me one more time. He built something real, not just the firm, not the accounts or the insurance or the careful architecture of protection he left behind. He built the particular kind of love that does not announce itself, that shows up in sealed envelopes and paper-clipped documents, and a heart drawn next to a name, slightly lopsided, in a drawer that was waiting for me to be ready to open it. Diane thought she was taking everything. She took the debt. She left me everything that mattered. I never raised my voice. I never had to.